My name's Brian, recovered alcoholic. My sobriety date's February 2nd, 1997. And for that, I'm truly grateful. Let's open this workshop with a moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholic that could be in the rooms of AA suffering from untreated alcoholism or outside drinking and dying. So let's take a moment and reflect on that. And we're going to follow that with the set aside prayer. Okay, the set aside prayer. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, about these 12 steps, the big book, my disease, and other spiritual conceptions, so I may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me see the truth. Amen. So today, I'm going to do step 5, and I'm pretty much going to do it the same way I would do it with people that I sponsor. And I really want to show you how to do this because there's nothing, there's nothing written in the book. And really on how to do it. This got a couple things in step 5, but really step 5, when we get into the book here, which we will at some point, it starts on like page 72, but pretty much from 72, 73, 74, and even 75 is all about who's going to listen, and nowadays, and it's all about choosing the person that we're going to listen to and all of that. And it's just nowadays, there's so many people that are available, to sit with you and listen to your fourth step. There's just so many people available, just like what we have here in Zoom. Um, I just think such a beautiful thing to have Zoom, And so, 1, 2, 3. There's 4 pages, even though it says step 5, but those 4 pages, all they're talking about is who's going to hear a story. And then when it says that when we're ready to hear, when it's ready, when we decide who is to hear a story, we waste no time. We have a written inventory and prepared for a long talk, and then all it says for step 5 is it says we pocket our pride, go to it, eliminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. That's pretty much all it says about step 5. 2 lines, or actually only 1 line. We pocket our pride, go into it, eliminating every twist of character, every dark cranny in the past. And then it says, once we have taken this step, and that's all it tells us to do. It's 2 lines. The rest of the pages is all about who are we going to find to listen to our story. And so I will read that stuff, but just I'm not going to jump in there just yet. Okay. I want you to think about here before we kind of continue on. We spent a lot of time in that, in that 3rd column of resentments. We spent a lot of time in there looking at that ego state of view, ego state of being, a delusional state, and living that way for so long, and I didn't even know it. That was just that in itself was mind blowing for me. And then I also had this thought that came to mind when I was doing the fear inventory, and it was that when I was looking at all my inventories, looking at my resentment inventory and my fear inventory and my sex conduct, and what I had come to realize is that I had created it all. Like it says in step 3, our problems are of our own making and they arise out of ourselves. And what I got from step 4 was all that stuff that I had wrote about. I had created all of it. Like I was the great creator of my own life, because from living on self-will, self-reliance, living on self-reliance for so long and relying on myself, that I created everything in my life. I created the reality that I lived in. That's why when I looked at it with the magnifying glass, sponsor takes this out and I look at it and I see where my ego has been and all that it was completely mind-blowing, because I didn't even think I had been living like that. I thought I'd been humble. Like it says in there, I thought I'd lost my egotism, But what I realize is that I created it all of it. I created all of it. I created the drama. I just created it all. In step 3, it talks about we have to stop creating our own problems, you know? And so, um, what I had realized all along is that I had been playing God. And so the whole purpose of doing that third column, there's lots of purpose, there's lots of things that's going to come out of that third column. But the purpose of that third column and with that we did it the way that we did, it was so that way you can turn the second column into a lie to help you see where you've been playing God. If you remember back in step 3, I said, I will show you where you've been playing God in the next step, you know? And for me, that was just huge because I didn't think I was playing God. I thought I was pretty humble. I found out that I had an ego. I found out that I pretty much saw where I had been playing God, especially in that third and fourth column of resentments. Just taking a pause for a second. The other thing is, can you did everyone get a chance to see where they've been spiritually sick in that third column? By living in that delusional false sense of false states, false sense of self there, living in that ego delusional state. No wonder, if I me really sitting in that third column for a while in meditation, the realization to me that came to me was no wonder people treated me the way that they did in column 2. No wonder I would have treated myself the same way. I would have treated anybody the same way that people treated me. You know, it helps me to come to this realization that that second column was a lie based on the delusional state that I was in the third column. And I can totally see where I've been playing God. This is the beginning here of me finding out who I really am and not when I find out who I really am by doing this inventory, for me, I realize I don't want to be like this person anymore. Just like it was in step 1 when I came in through the doors of AA, I just didn't want to be that person anymore. Show me how not to how do I not drink? Now it's to the point where how do I not act out on these behaviors that I don't like anymore? You see? So I want you to think about that resentments, where you've been playing God. Can you see where you've been spiritually sick in that third column by living in that delusional state? Can you also see in that third column how it's based, that third column is based on your internal condition of the bedevilments from page 52. They just line right up with that third column. And then also we went over where we come out of that ego state in that third column and we have to go right into a prayer, because when I'm prayer and meditation is what's going to help keep that ego at bay, you know, and that prayer. So, when we're going through these resentments and Esponsi's reading them to us, you know, a lot of them will disappear, and then for the ones that don't disappear, that's where we'll use that anger prayer. God, save me from being angry. How can I be helpful to them? It's just a real simple prayer. God, save me from being angry. So I need to do something here. I'm going to add something in. When somebody, it says here on page 67, when somebody offended, when a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful? What do I mean by being offended? I'm just going to write a couple of other words. When a person, offended, it could be irritated me, agitated. It could be anything in there. Offended could be anything. You know, got me mad, got me angry, whatever. Offended could really be anything. You know, this is a sick man. See, it's reminding us this is a sick man. You know, and that I need to pray for them. God save me. And it's not like I got to pray for them. I'm praying for me. God save me from being angry. And then it says it gives a specific direction. We avoid retaliation and argument. You know, it really gives a specific direction on what to do there. You know, and so with the resentment sheet, if you have all your resentment sheet in front of you, you know, I just want to go over this real quick, and that's you know, in order for me to see my truth, I need to take out a magnifying glass. You know, and that I hope by me taking out this magnifying glass, that will help all of you see your truth. So, you know, the truth about the first column where I have all those names, you know, it's really not about the people in column one. It's not about the names at all. It's really about what they did to me that really pissed me off. It's not so much their names. It's just what they did. Learn to separate the person from what they did. If you learn to separate the person from what they did, learn to separate column 2 from column 1, you're going to have better relationships when you learn to separate that. You know, I learned to talk better in recovery, talk better about my feelings, you know, and you know, I learned a lot of that when I was raising my kids, and I would say, you know, something like, you know, it really bothered me when you did that. Now I learned to separate that because I love my child no matter what they do. I love them unconditionally, but it can make me upset when they do something, and that's what I tell them. I told them it makes me upset when you do this. You know, I learned to separate the what the person did from the person. You know, so my main truth of column 1, it's not so much the names. My real truth of column 1 is actually column 2, and that's what they did to me that really pissed me off. You know, and I always like to think of column 1 and 2 as me pointing the finger, me pointing the finger, you know. And the truth of column 2, again, can I change anything in column 2? Can you change or control anything? No. And are you really mad at what they did to you, or are you really mad on how it hurt and threatened you on the inside? If you weren't so angry with the person in column 2 and the way it affected you in column 3, then you wouldn't even be angry with them at all. You know, the truth of the column 2, again, it's not what they did, it's how deeply it affected you in column 3. Again, if it didn't affect you so deeply in column 3, that's why we expanded it. You wouldn't even be mad at them in column 1. You would have felt you got what you deserve, you know, in column 2. And I can tell you that there's been times in my life where I just felt like I got what I deserved and I didn't complain about it. And I just went on with my life, you know, versus you feel like you didn't get what you deserve, and then you end up going into resentment. So the real truth of the second column is the third column on how deeply it affected me. And that's where the real work begins. You know, that's why when we did that broke down that third column, I talked about the key, you know, and the key is for me to see the life I had been living and realizing I don't want to live that life anymore. And the whole key is change. This whole thing is about change. Again, so the truth is not in column 1. The truth of column 1 is really column 2. And it's not so much what they did to you as it is and how deeply it affected you in column 3. So the truth about column 2 is really column 3. And column 3 is that one column where it's like, man, I got all these fingers pointing back at me. I'm busy pointing the finger at 1 and 2. And that third one is really got the fingers pointed at me, you know. In that third column, it's my self-centered difficulties with the ego, you know. And it says the main problem of the alcoholic is centered in my thinking, you know. It says lack of power was my dilemma. And that's really the lack of power in that column 3 is my lack is my dilemma. When I gain access to the power, when I gain access to the power, I rise above my internal difficulties in column 3. You see, it says in there, if you remember, I think it was in um, there's a solution that talked about we only have two alternatives, you know, two alternatives. One's to go on to the bitter end, and the other one to accept spiritual help, you know. So we're on this spiritual path, and you are building a spiritual structure within yourself with your higher power, with God or whatever you want to call it. You're building the spiritual structure within, because that's where the problem is in the third column. It's within. They always say that recovery is an inside job. When I get the inside right, man, the outside, everything just sort of falls in place. So the whole purpose of the third column, the way we did it with the ego, is for that way you can see where you've been playing God, and you can see that that second column turns into a lie because it's based on a delusional state. And for me, some of the names that were in column 1, they just sort of disappeared because it was sort of like my realization in there. That's why I have realization across the top. I write them a lot. I have a lot of realizations, but one of the realization, for me, was that I had been living a certain way for so long and I just didn't even know it and didn't want to be like that anymore. You know, um, and I can totally see where I've been playing God, even though I didn't even think I was. It was just quite a realization for me. The whole thing about playing God and the whole thing about having an ego and all of that, and I just did not even think that that wasn't even a problem. You know, you can see in your fourth column how that fear, pretty much how you're driven by fear. In that fourth column, it was the fear that drove the dishonest delusion in my mind, even in column 3. It's that fear that we had bracketed that drove the dishonest delusion, that fueled the selfish attitude, and that resulted in my self-seeking actions. You know, to me, that was even a realization, even doing a fourth column like that. You know, the biggest thing is to know that, you know, when you do this work, you know, the ego will kind of, when you do the work, the ego will kind of go right over here, you know. And in order for me to keep that ego from coming back, is going to be in a direct relations on how I live a spiritual life. The ego cannot use me at all when I am on a spiritual path, living a spiritual life, doing prayer and meditation, as stated in the book. The ego just doesn't the ego's going to go find somebody else to use. The ego needs you to do its bidding. Without you doing that, the ego just can't use you if you're on a spiritual path. You know, it just it doesn't have any room for it there. And so again, we're on the spiritual path. And so again, I reviewed some of the resentments. Um, you can now see the truth. I hope you can now see your own truth in these resentments as we went over them. We broke down the columns all last week. You can now see how you usually do things to people and institutions based on your own character defects in that ego state of being, which later placed you in a position to be hurt. And how I, through my resentments, had distorted the issue and transferred blame from me to them in column 2. Or perhaps I did nothing to people institutions to create the resentment. But if I weren't so selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened, or inconsiderate, I could forgive them and set myself free from the past. I could forgive them and set myself free. I just had a thought that just came to mind, and it was about step 3. And for me, it's that bondage of self, that we're doing. This whole inventory is all about self-will. It's all about the bondage of self, all of this, you know. And we ask in step 3 to be set free from the bondage of self. The whole inventory is that bondage of self. When we do step 5, that's that step that's getting ready to, that's that step where we're, you know, sort of letting go, of the past in a sense. We realize, for me, I realize what I'm looking at, I just don't want to be anymore, you know? Now I can see the part I have been playing. Can you now see the part that you've been playing in your resentments? Can you see where you've been playing God? You know? Can you see where you're selfish, dishonest? Can you see that some of those that you resented, that you have actually harmed as well? Can you see that some of those that you resent in column 1, you have actually harmed too? Those names will now come off the list and be placed on a list of 8 steps. Now, what I do is I just save the 4 steps. So we'll just leave it there. We'll go over that when we get to step 8 or 9. All right. Hope you can see your truth about them, and most will disappear. For those that do not disappear, we're talking about the names on column 1. You can see how prayer for those I resent will remove the resentment. That's on page 67. God, save me for being angry. Through this inventory process, I can now be resentment free. My mind, which was before controlled by people and institutions through my resentment toward them, can now be directed by the power of God. That power of God. I can now see that many of those I resented are people and institutions I have harmed. I have now removed from my mind the first manifestation of self, which has been blocking me off from the power of God. I will automatically begin to feel better. God will not allow a vacuum or a void in my mind. So I want you to think about this as we're talking about, you're looking at stuff and then you're like, okay, I don't want to hold on to resentments anymore. So when something's taken away, it's usually replaced with something else. That's why it's talking about God's not going to allow a vacuum or a void. Where I used to have resentment, I can now begin to experience love, patience, tolerance, and goodwill. And if you remember, all those come from page 67. Um, those are assets that we already have. Those are assets: love, patience, tolerance, goodwill. We already have that. We're born with these good qualities. They just can't come to the surface because they were blocked off by resentment. God, or the power of God, dwells within all human beings, and these things have always been a part of your makeup, but you could not use them because of your resentments. Now that resentment is gone, some of the qualities of God within you can rise to the surface. You are in much less danger of drinking now than you were before looking at your resentments. Is there on uh, any questions on resentments for step 5? Does anybody have any questions on what we covered so far? Okay, I'm going to jump right into fear. Can everybody see why fear is right after resentment? Because the first thing it says is notice the fears bracketed alongside the difficulties. And that's going right back to referring to column 3 on page 65, you know? And so fear is quite easy in a sense because um, if I don't believe in some kind of power, some kind of spiritual power or some kind of, so I can live a spiritual way of life. If I don't have that, then I'm going to experience excessive fear because I'm relying on self-reliance, and self-reliance failed me. So again, lack of power is my dilemma. I got to find a power by which I could live, you know? I hope that you all were able to see your truth and fears because of self-reliance failed you. I really want you to think about that. It's only 2 columns in there in the fear inventory, not 4 or 5. It's not even a third column. It just says we list our fears and then why do we have them? And then wasn't it because self-reliance failed me? And that's usually a yes or no question. And most of the time, it's always going to be yes, Um, once you see your truth about them, most will disappear. That's why it says that once we commence to outgrow fear. For those that do not disappear, you can see how prayer can be used to remove the fear. And that's on Big Book, page 68, the bottom of 68, is that fear prayer. Help me. At once we commence to outgrow fear. Through this inventory process, I can now be free from excessive fear. My mind, which was before controlled by people, institutions through fear, can now be directed by God. Remember in that fear, it says we are now in the role to play. We are now in the world to play the role God assigns, not in the world to play the role I assign. You have now removed from your mind the second manifestation of self, which has been blocking you off from God's will or the power of God. I will automatically begin to feel better. God will not allow a vacuum or a void in my mind. Where I used to have excessive fear, I can now begin to operate with courage. I will find that I can do many things I was formerly afraid to do, and I can quit doing some things I was afraid not to do. You do not have to read other books or search out courage. God dwells within all human beings, and courage has always been a part of your makeup. But I could not use it because of fears, because the fear was covering it up. Now that fear is gone, the qualities of God within me can rise to the surface, and I am much less danger of drinking now than I was before looking at my fear. The book doesn't say that fear goes away and never comes back. And that's what I was hoping it was going to do. It states that we outgrow fear. We outgrow fear through prayer. We're asking God to direct us toward His will, to do His work, to do His bidding. It's just that simple, and the miracle of it is that it works. As we learn to trust, rely, and depend upon that power, God's power, and the strength, and strengthen this relationship, and strengthen that relationship, our fears will just fall from us as we grow spiritually away from the fear. And then with faith comes courage to outgrow the fear. With faith gives me the courage to walk through the fear. So without the power of God, I will continue to be afraid of the things in column 1 because self-reliance failed me. When we trust, rely, and depend upon God or the power of God, our faith and belief will evolve, and it will grow, and so will you. So your faith and belief will evolve. So far we've done resentments and we've done fears, and they both ended with a prayer to help kill off that ego, because resentment and fears both stem from the ego. I want to share one experience with fear, and I don't know who's going to be able to identify with this or not, but my mom was dying of cancer, and I moved her into my house, and I became her caretaker for the last 4 months of her life, and I just pretty much just, watched her deteriorate, but I took care of her. I remember thinking, like, I remember saying to myself, I am afraid I can't handle this by myself. Like, I can't, this is too much for me. I am overwhelmed and all of that. But I had nobody to help, and I had to just walk through it gracefully. And when I got on the other side of it, I remember thinking that wasn't as bad as I thought. What was I afraid of? You see, sometimes I just create fears in my own mind, real or imagined. I can just create it. Like I used to be afraid of the boogeyman in the closet or underneath the bed and things like that. And eventually we just outgrow them, and we don't even have that. I don't have that fear anymore. I can go to sleep with my leg hanging off the bed and not worry about nothing there touching it. You know what I'm saying? You see, I'm just saying that as we get older and we get more mature, we outgrow our fears, especially when we're living a spiritual way of life. Okay, so the last inventory was sex. Now, I want to go over this a little bit because, it says in the sex inventory, on page 69, it says, we reviewed our conduct over the years past. And it says, where had we been selfish, or dishonest, or inconsiderate, and that is before it states whom had we hurt. So why you would think that whom do we hurt would be first. But it's not. And the reason why it's not is because it's more important about your conduct on where you have been selfish or where you had been dishonest or where you had been inconsiderate to someone else. That behavior and that conduct is more important for you to look at than it is to who you hurt, because this whole thing is about change. You're changing your conduct so you don't keep hurting people anymore. Okay. And that is why I wanted to answer that question, because that is why it's before whom did we hurt, because it's more important for us to see where we've been selfish, dishonest, and inconsiderate than it is to have a list of who we hurt. Now, of course, who we hurt is going to be important, and that's going to be listed, written down, and that'll be something we will look at going forward as far as making amends. When you have listed and analyzed your sex conduct of the past, you can now see why you need to change some of your sex ideals of the past. Remember, we went over sex ideal, right? Now you can see why you need to change some of your sex ideals from the past. I can see that I need to build a sane and sound sex life for the future. Through prayer and meditation, a new sex life can be formed where I am not constantly in conflict with myself or others. I want you to think about this, is you can create a sane and sound sex life even when you're married, even when you're in a relationship. You can create all of this, whether you're in one or not in one. You have now listed and analyzed your sex conduct of the past, which resulted in harms to others. It's the third manifestation of self, which has been blocking you from the power of God. I will automatically begin to feel better. Some guilt and remorse will have disappeared. Some of the imperious urge will be lessened. I have now placed myself in the right frame of mind and in the right position to be able to make amends to those people wherever possible. When I make my amends in step 9, I will then continue to lose my fear, guilt, and remorse. So in order to remain present, live in this moment and stay present. In order to remain in the present and grow in the fellowship of the Spirit, we talk about those who have harmed us and we pray for them. That's why it says, God save me from being sick. It helps me to forgive others. When I look upon other people, and if I look upon the people in column 2 as being sick, that makes it easier for me to forgive them. Forgiveness is the key to serenity. So if you want peace, you got to learn how to forgive. That doesn't mean you have to forget. You just have to learn to forgive. If I want people to forgive me, then I have to learn to forgive them. And then here's the biggest thing. I have learned in my sobriety, it's easier for me to forgive others. And man, it was harder. It was hard to forgive myself. I would beat myself up so much for the way I treated myself. And I had to have a sponsor tell me that I need to learn to treat myself as if I'm my best friend. Talk to myself as if I'm my best friend, and treat myself as if I'm my best friend, not as if I'm my worst enemy, because that is the way I used to treat myself. Again, learning to forgive myself, through prayer, a lot of prayer and a lot of meditation to get to that place where I can forgive myself and just be at complete peace. And if I can go through that, and that can happen to me, it can happen to anyone here. Again, we're looking at, I'm going to start reading here. I just want to go to the bottom of 70 where it just has a review. If we have been thorough about our inventory, we have written down a lot. Has everyone written down a lot? As I know, I sure have. It says we have listed and analyzed our resentments. Did we do that? Have we begun to comprehend their futility, uselessness, and their fatality, deadliness? We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men. You see, we have learned. begin to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill. Even our enemies, if we look upon them as sick people. How many times do we go over that sick people a lot, right? We have a list of the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. Again, that whole inventory was all about self-will, everything. And we only did 3 inventories. There isn't any other inventory on here. I mean, I've only found resentments, fear, and sex conduct. Now, there isn't one specifically for harm. You know, that's why when we do the inventories with resentment and we do fears and we do the sex conduct, we write down, is there any other way that we've harmed anyone as we're writing down that resentment? And we put it on that same paper in that 3rd column. When we did that 3rd column or the 4th column, wherever you put it, you know. I noticed sometimes for me, you know, with the fears, I started a lot of that, you know, in my own mind, but a lot of times I didn't create any harms with my fears. The harms was pretty much with myself, you know, and driving myself insane, being paranoid over nothing, you know. I will tell you though, when the cops get behind me and they throw on those lights and I'm driving my car, I'm just going to tell you that I do get this little bit of fear, you know, does hit me for a second. And I'm like, wait a minute, you know, but then I kind of smile and I know it's nothing because I haven't done anything wrong. But I'm just letting you know that I still experience a little bit of fear when the lights are pulling me over. I think it's kind of natural because of where we've been in the past that I'm natural to feel that way. But I'm sharing some of these things with you because I think it's important to know there's a difference between excessive fear and healthy fear. Now, I'm going to share one example. I live in Arizona. So a fear that I have is, well, I'm really afraid. We have 17 different kinds of rattlesnakes. I am petrified of being bit by a rattlesnake. Why? Because I could die. You know, you might only have seconds. Okay. Now, healthy fear is having that fear because I don't want to die. That's healthy. Now, unhealthy fear, it would be that I am afraid to walk outside my door because the snake is just waiting to get me. You see how that's really excessive? You know, I like to go hiking. I'm out there hiking as much as I can when the weather's good. You know, I don't even think about it. I don't even think about the snake. And of course, until I hear a rattle, and then I'm scared. But you see what I'm saying is it's one thing to have fear and have a healthy fear. It's another thing to experience excessive fear because self-reliance failed me. There's a difference. And I want you to make sure that you understand the difference between excessive fear and healthy fear. You know, um, another one of my, I guess you could say healthy fear is that I have a gluten problem. So when I eat too much bread or too much, that's got too much gluten in it, it just tears up my stomach and creates, I get like gas. And anyway, I have a bad reaction. It affects me in a bad way. So I have to be careful. I have that little bit of fear when I'm eating it. All right, is this too much or not enough? You see what I'm saying? Because I don't like to feel that way. So again, that's a healthy fear for me to be aware of what I'm eating and what I'm putting in my body, and that I don't put too much of something in there that I can have a bad reaction to it. All right. I want to, I'm back on 71. If you have made a decision, step 3, and an inventory, step 4 of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested big chunks of, I underline that word, truth about yourself. This isn't about me to find out your secrets. This isn't about me to find out anything. This is about you to swallow and digest the truth about yourself. And I hope I was able to take the magnifying glass out and help you see your truth. Because sometimes that's all I need. I just need someone to sort of guide me, and show me. So I hope that a lot of you had some truths that were revealed to you while we were doing this. Um, The other thing I want to put out is when I'm in that ego state, in that third column, when I'm in that ego state, I can't differentiate the true from the false. Think about when you're in that third column, when we did that third column with the ego state and went all the way down. When I'm in the middle of that, man, I can't differentiate the true from the false. I just keep creating more drama for myself when I'm in the middle of that. The other thing I want to talk about the ego state is that I truly believed that I was fine or I'm okay when in the midst of disaster, right? I think that I'm doing just fine. I truly believe, that I am doing really good in the midst of disaster. And that's what I got out of the ego state, is I truly believed I didn't have an ego. I believed I was the humblest person ever, And then when I went through that, I was just like, wow, I could be a real jerk. I don't want to be a jerk. I don't want to act like this anymore. I don't want to be like this, I don't want to act this way. I want to be more aware of that ego so it doesn't, and again, the ego returning is your direct result of you living a spiritual life. So again, if you're lacking in living a spiritual life through prayer and meditation, the ego is going to come back and it's going to, wreak havoc and create all kinds of drama. And you're just going to be creating it all. Again, the ego needs you to perform its work. When you're living a spiritual way of life and you're on it being spiritually fit, the ego can't use you. I'm going to go to page 72. Having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We have been trying to get I want you to underline, a new attitude. I need to get a new attitude. Number 2, a new relationship with our creator, with my creator, a relationship with this power. I define a power by which I can live. Now I'm going to learn to have a relationship with this power. And then the third one is to discover the obstacles in our path, which we've just put our hands on. We have admitted certain defects. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is: resentments, fears, conduct. We have put our finger on the weak items in the personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapters. This is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. I'm going to tell you, I didn't find it too difficult when they started talking about their defects. And then I realized I just pretty much, it talks about in the book in chapter 7, with the newcomer, I'm going to paraphrase it, but the newcomer matches some of his inconsistencies with some of yours. The newcomer matches his inconsistencies with yours. My inconsistencies come up when I do step 4. It says, we think we have done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There is doubt about that. There is doubt. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient because I can't differentiate the true from the false. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We will be more reclined to discussing ourselves with another person when we can see good reason why we should do so. The best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives, trying to avoid this humbling, underline that word, humbling experience. It's very humbling when you're sharing your 4th step with somebody. They have turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed, there's that word never, if you want to underline that, and I write that, and never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. We call them secrets. I always tell people, if you got any secrets like that, just write them down on the back page and we'll go over them. They only thought they lost there's that word, egotism and fear. Look at that, right? Egotism. That's the ego state of living that we talked about in that third column. It's right there on page 73, right? And then it's the fear. Remember all that fear that drove that resentment in that third column, in that last column? Right? They only thought they lost their egotism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. But they have not learned enough humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else look at that, all their life story, all their life story of living life run on self-will. Man, it's pretty simple. I don't have to sit down with somebody and have them tell me, listen, if I had to sit down with you and tell you my life story, I'm almost 57 years old. Do you know how long that would take me to tell you my life story? You got years? You got years? Because we're going to need to talk every day for hours, and it's going to take years and years, probably another 57 years for me to tell you everything. This is not what that's about. You see where it says life story? No. You see, that's not even squiggly writing. The squiggly writing is all. It's not their life story. People get this screwed up all the time. Oh, I got to share somebody my life story. So what do? They give you 150 fucking questions. I've seen step 4 like that before, where it's 150 questions. I don't even know what the hell I got out of that. Okay? Yeah, I'm trying to get my life story. But here, I just want to point out, their life story is not in that squiggly writing, but the all is. It's more important. Listen, my life story is about my life run on self-will, period. It's all about step 3. That's all I could tell you about because that is all I know. Of course, now that I'm in recovery, half my life, that's a different story. But I'm trying to present this to you where it's not about the life story until I told someone all what my life was like when living on self-will. That's the whole point of doing an inventory. The whole inventory is about self-will. It says more than most people, more than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. I want you to think about page 60 and 61. He is very much the actor. Remember where that came from? Page 60. To the outer world, he presents a stage character. That's the ego, right? Stage character, ego. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but he knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. The inconsistencies is made worse by the things he does on a spree. Coming to his senses, he revolts at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never, underline that word, never see the light of day. What are we talking about? Secrets, right? He is under constant fear and tension that makes for more drinking. Psychiatrists are inclined to agree with us. We have spent thousands of dollars for examination. We know but few instances where we have given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. Small wonder many of the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chances of recovery. It says we must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. Long or happily, I got to trust somebody. Rightly and naturally, we think, well, before choosing the person or persons with whom, see where it says we chose the person or persons. You know what this means? You can have more than one person listening to your fifth step. And I'm going to tell you, I have. When I first did my first fifth step with a sponsee, my sponsor was there with me, with them, still guiding me, you know? Well, we think well before choosing the person or persons with whom we take this intimate confidential step. Those of us belong to a religious denomination which requires confession must, and of course, will want to go to the proper appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. Though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk with someone ordained by established religion. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. Of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. Now, I'm going to stop right there and just say, I'm just going to write down sponsor. The only one that's going to know an alcoholic better is another alcoholic, not a priest, unless he's an alcoholic priest. It's one. This has always been one alcoholic helping another alcoholic. If we cannot or would not rather do this, we search our acquaintances for a closed-mouth, understanding friend. Again, sponsor. Sponsor's done this before. They know how much of an honor it is. You know, it may be one of our family, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives or parents which will hurt them and make them unhappy. Again, they're going to give you all this stuff because sponsors were not as prevalent as they are now. We have no right to save our skin at another person's expense. Such parts of our story we tell to someone who will understand yet be unaffected. The rule is, I got this highlighted in green. The rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. That's the biggest thing right here of step 4. When I am reading my step 4, that the rule must be hard on myself, but always considerate of others. Notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with somebody, it may be that one is so situated that there is no suitable person available. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you got Zoom, you got internet, that is all you need. That is all you need. And I'm going to tell you, I've shared my 4th step 5, with a complete stranger that I didn't even know. If he even had experience doing step 5, it just didn't matter. It just didn't matter, you know. But I've had an experience with sharing it with people I didn't even know. If that is so, this step may be postponed. Only, however, if we hold ourselves in complete readiness to go through it at the first opportunity. That's the only time you're going to see that word postponed. I think it comes up on the other page one at a time. And it's only because the only time you're going to ever postpone the step and put it off is if you don't have someone that's going to listen to it. And nowadays, you don't have to postpone it. There's lots of available. We say this because we are very anxious that we talk to the right person. It is important that he be able to keep confidence, that he fully understand and approve what we are driving at, that he will not try to change our plan. But we must not use this as a mere excuse to postpone. There's that word postpone. I can't use it as an excuse to postpone, because you know what? There's so many people on the internet now, on Zoom, everything, you know. When we decide who is to hear our story, look at this. Once we decide who's there, we waste no time. No time wasted. We have a written inventory and prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we are about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we're engaged upon a life and death. Underline that. Life and death, Aaron. This is a life and death step. It says if we don't do this, we're probably going to drink again. And for us to drink is to die. That's why it's life and death. Most people approach this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. It says, we pocket our pride, we go to it, eliminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Now, the next line, we start to 5th step promises. First one, once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. That's the first promise, we are delighted. 2, we can look the world in the eye instead of looking down all the time. 3, we can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Man, I can tell you what, I didn't like being alone at all, and now I can be alone at perfect peace, inside and ease. 4, our fears fall from us. And why do our fears fall from us? Because we are growing spiritually, and they just don't fit. It's like an old shirt that you wore when you were 12. You can't put it on anymore because it doesn't fit. 5, we begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. I start to feel close to that power. I start to feel close to God. 6, we may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but we now begin to have a spiritual experience. By me doing step 5, that's when I begin to have a spiritual experience. It begins. And then 7, the feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. I want you to think about this for 1 second. The feeling that the drink problem is gone will often come strongly. And what comes strongly is that I don't drink. I don't drink. You see? And that's what's going to come strongly, right? The feeling that the drink problem is gone will come strongly. I don't drink anymore. And then 8. We feel we're on a broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe, walking hand in hand with God. I hope that's what you're going to feel, walking hand in hand with God, you know? When you finish step 5, right? Or not when when you finish, when usually people finish step 5 with me, this is what I have them do. The next paragraph. It says, returning home, we find a place where we could be quiet for an hour. So I tell them, no interruptions for this hour. You need to go somewhere where you can be in meditation. You can't have any distractions for that whole hour. And then you're just going to follow the directions here. Returning home, we find a place where we could be quiet for an hour. That means in meditation. And then it says, we're going to have 2 reviews in here. It says, carefully reviewing what we have done. I usually tell them to keep your resentment sheet out, keep your fear out, keep your sex out. Review what you've done. Just look at that 4th step, review what you've done, and ask yourself. It's going to say right here. So carefully reviewing what we have done, which is resentments to step 4. We thank God from the bottom of our heart, that we know him better. Thank God from the bottom of your heart that you know him better, because God has brought you all the way to this point, not me. Taking this book down from the shelf, we turn to the pages which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals. Again, now we're going to have another review of steps 1 through 5. Okay, because first the review was what we've done, which was step 4. Now we're going to review the first 5 steps. And now it says, the next line is a prayer. It says, we ask. I highlighted in yellow as a prayer, and it says, we ask. And who do you think we're going to ask? We're going to ask God. If we have omitted anything, God, have I left anything out? This is all done in meditation. God, have I left anything out? Sit in meditation for a bit. Right? For you are building an arch, for we, see what it says, we? That means you and God are building an arch to which you shall walk a free person, a free man, a free woman at last. So you're building this within yourself, a spiritual structure. And then you got these questions. 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. Again, you're in meditation. I want you to think about this. When you're in meditation, right? Or you got a new job, because it says in step 3, we got a new employer, right? We got a new boss. And when you're doing the boss's work, you're going to stop about halfway and go, hey, how am I doing? How's my work so far? Think about this. This is not what you're asking me. This is what you're asking your higher power in meditation. It says right here, is our work solid so far? You're talking you and God. Hey, God, is our work solid so far? Right? Are the stones properly in place? That foundation stone, the cornerstone, the keystone. You're asking God, are the stones properly in place? You're not asking yourself, and you're not asking me. You're asking God. Have we, meaning you and God, skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? Because you can't make mortar without sand. You need all equal parts. Again, our meditation, reviewing what you did. Have we left anything out? Is there anything else I need to put in here? At the bottom of resentments and fears and sex, you're just going to have a word named harms, and you're just going to look around each one and see if there's any harms in any of those. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, I almost did it. Good hour. Good. Has anybody got any questions on step 5 as being, as hearing? I do keep a pad when I am listening to people's 5th steps. I do keep a little pad, but I generally don't write down a lot of stuff that much anymore. I used to write down stuff, but I don't generally anymore, because I used to have. So I used to, when we did step 5, I used to burn step 4. I just did like a ritual, and we did burn it and just get rid of it so nobody could see it. And now it's now it's different, because now I don't do that anymore. You just change. I don't know about you, but I changed the way, as a sponsor, over the years, I've changed the way that I've sponsored. It just sort of, it just always keeps, it's sort of like a mold in progress. And I'm kind of molding it when I go into prayer and meditation. It just seems like, when I sponsor people, I just sponsor them differently than the way I used to sponsor. It's not saying that I like to think that I'm probably more effective, because that's the way I always like to look at it, to try to be more effective. But I just know that my sponsorship has totally changed in the way I used to do it, even when the big pandemic first began in 2020. So even in 5 years, I've changed, you know? And the hardest thing is I can't see the change, and I can't go back to the way I used to do things because I can't remember, you know? All right. So does anybody have any questions at all about step 5? There isn't any stupid question, and the question you ask might help somebody else. So we're sitting like on this doorstep, in a sense, of step 6, you know? And I really want you to look at your past life. Look at the stuff that you wrote about. Look at the person that you look at your truth. Is that really the truth of who you really are? Or is that just the truth of, the way you behave and act? Because I like to think that what you wrote down is really not who you are, because really who you really are is underneath all of that. It's underneath all that stuff that's been blocking you, is really who your true self is. So once you get rid of the resentments that's in the way, that first block of self, and you get rid of the fear, and you look at your sex conduct, you know, you're going to start to feel, especially when you share this with somebody. I know for me, I started to feel something, um, not right away, but it was more like the next morning when I woke up, I felt like I just took a big backpack off my back, and I just felt lighter on my feet. And I remember calling my sponsor right away, and I was like, dude, something's not right. Like, this is how I'm feeling, you know? Like, should I really be feeling this way, or should I just be feeling terrible? And he's like, no, what you're experiencing is being free from the bondage of self. It's that it's that almost like letting go of the self. You hold the key to unlock the bondage of self. Only you hold the key to unlock what's inside of you, not God. I mean, God's going to play a role in that, you know. But I just feel like I was more acceptable to the spiritual solution when I was just beaten down from alcoholism. Beaten down. It just beat me down. What did it say? Beat me down into a state of reasonableness. And then I said, okay, I'll believe in something. I'll find something. I'll figure it out. Like, I can't keep going the way that I'm going. And that's how it is when I approach this step. Is this is where it leaves me. It leaves me at the point where I don't want nothing to do with that person that I wrote about. All that stuff that I wrote about, I don't want to be that person no more. And that's where I really want you to be sitting, right now, is look at that. Look at, it said review. So when I reviewed it all, right, in meditation, I didn't like what I'd become. I wanted to be more. I want to be kind, and I want to be considerate, and I want to have patience, and I want to have tolerance. I want to have all those good qualities. I want them to come up, right? You know, like, I was just ready for this change. I am ready for this. I don't want to be that jerk anymore, you see? But the beautiful thing now is that now you're going to be aware when you start to do something and the ego comes out and you start to do something. I hope you stop yourself. You stop yourself. Because that's what I started to do. Once I learned how to control this and stop myself, I would stop myself all the time. You know, I'd get into an argument and I'd go, ah. And then she'd say, what were you going to say? Nothing. I wasn't going to say nothing. You see what I mean? But I hope that I'm teaching you how to apply this step into your life. When you start to feel irritated, right? Someone is offending you. You start to feel irritated. Pause. Take a pause. Don't say nothing. Don't do nothing. And take a couple minutes and go. If you got to go to the bathroom, whatever you got to do, go say that prayer. God, save me from being angry. How can I be helpful? And you know what? A lot of times when it comes up to me, how can I be helpful, is not to say something for at least 5 minutes. Not to say something for 5 minutes. That's how I can be helpful. Don't open my mouth, because my first reaction is not going to be good. It's going to be like diarrhea, Tourette syndrome of the mouth. if you know what I mean. I am going to create more problems and I'm going to have to go back and make more amends. But I don't, it's not necessary if I just learn how to pause at this moment right here in that prayer. God save me from being angry. Pause. The moment you start to feel disturbed on the inside, stop what you're doing. Pause. Reconnect with the power. Reconnect with the power. Whatever you believe in that power is what's going to save your life. That relationship with that power. I have to live by a spiritual basis of life, or else I am going to suffer. And I don't want to suffer. I've suffered. We've all suffered enough. We've all suffered enough, even here. Being sober in the meetings, I've suffered enough. The other thing I want to talk about is there's so many different ways of going through the big book. There are. I'm going to tell you that I did back to basics meetings for 10 years. I traveled the country and did back to basics workshops with Wally P from 1999 to 2009. But it's quite different. We go through all the steps in one day. You know what I mean? And then you have Joe and Charlie. They are personal friends of mine. They are not around here anymore. I can show you pictures of me. As a matter of fact, that one right here. Here we go. That's me with Charlie, and that's me with Joe. This was taken in 2005. Only reason why I know that is because I have it written down. I had my well, I can't find it. I have my badge. Oh, it's right here. Here's my badge. When I went to, I think it says 2005 on that. Yeah, Phoenix. They were in Phoenix 2005. And so that's not the first time I've seen them. I've seen them 2 or 3 times. Now, you know, I guess that's another way too. You know, you got different ways. You know, the way I prefer to do it is Big Book Awakening. I just feel that for me, that's such a deeper. I'm always looking for a deeper experience, and that's pretty much what I did here with the 4th step is all Big Book Awakening. You know, which my first sponsor actually wrote. You know, and then if you notice as we gone through, there's actual questions in the book, actual questions in the book that I go through and I highlight, and I take them in meditation and answer them for have the experience. You know, again, I'm all about having experience, deeper experience. A better, deeper experience. All right, so I like to end it here. End this. What I want to do too is first off, I want to let everyone know that well, I could do breakout rooms. I couldn't figure out how to do it though. If anyone knows how to do it, I would do a breakout room if anyone wanted, I wanted to make it available, the room available. If anybody wanted to share a step 5, we could do a breakout room or something like that to be available. I just want to make that available. If anybody wants to do that now, when we end the meeting, we have that ability to be able to do that. The other thing is I want to read a couple of sex ideals because that hung me up quite a bit for quite some time. And so I got a couple of them here for you. And so when we were drawing up a sex ideal for my future, at first off, I was thinking I'm going to draw up this perfect woman. You know what I mean? And and then what I realized is it really wasn't about me finding the perfect person for a relationship. It's about me becoming that perfect person in a relationship. About me becoming what I am looking for. It's about me becoming that. So I'm going to read a couple of them to you, just to kind of help you get started on that if you've already done it or not. So, here's the first one. God, in the future, I would like to be the person who has sex with people that I truly care about as an act of love in a way to be closer. I want to have had this time to get to know a person so that way I can make decisions that's based more in reality and less in sex or in just not wanting to be alone, filling the gap. I do not get involved with people who are committed in relationships in any level while I am committed and I respect my friendships. While they may not be in a committed relationship, I am sensitive to their feelings and don't get involved with someone that have strong feelings for someone else. I should wait and then you know, I don't, you know, sometimes I put a time in there. I should wait, you know, before like having sex kind of thing like that, you know. Um, I don't really have a rule of thumb with that. That's just me. That's just me. Get to know somebody, take some time, you know. I got another one here. God, please help me make my decisions about love and sex that they be based more in reality, aligned with your will, and not simply in carnal desire. Help me to avoid the fear of being alone. I want to be a man who has sex with someone after having some time to get to know the person as an act of love and a way of getting closer or becoming more intimate. God, please enable me to be willing, to be honest, to communicate openly with regards to our differences, goals, dreams, sex, finances. Please help me to bring a God consciousness into our relationship. Please help me to have a relationship that is free of all abuse. I want to love all others as they are and not hope to change them. You, God, make no mistakes. And then I got the last one. Help me not to get involved with someone who is committed in a relationship at any level, or while I am committed to someone else. Please help me to be an equal partner in every way possible. Help me avoid the temptation to control others with attention, affection, gifts, love, or sex. Please help me to act sexually as I would want a friend to act towards me. That is with honor, respect, and love. So I hope there was 4 of them there. I hope those 4 kind of helped everybody get an idea. And before I end this, I always like to give up some questions to help you kind of have a deeper experience. So I got 5 questions here that I'm going to put out. One is, am I willing to reveal what I have written and be totally transparent with someone? Again, am I willing to reveal what I have written and be totally transparent with someone? 2, can I really be honest with someone and with myself? 3, have I already made a decision to withhold something by not writing it down? And 4, is there any dark cranny in which I have not directed the light? Is there any dark cranny which I have not directed the light? Again, are you holding on to a secret? And number 5, am I willing to reveal all my secrets, shame, and guilt? Again, those 5 questions, take them into meditation to have a new experience. And I'm going to, again, I'd like to end this with the still thinking about the still sick and suffering alcoholic that might be in the room suffering or suffering outside the room. So let's take a moment to think about that person. I always like to end it with the serenity prayer because it's short and sweet. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, which is other people, and the courage to change the things I can, which is myself, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.